r/AskReddit. Redditors who grew up with overly permissive parents. What was the most absurd thing you were allowed to do? From the age of 10 or 11 on, basically no oversight whatsoever. Both parents worked at night. Had a babysitter that didn't even watch me. Could do literally anything 4 or 5 nights out of the week, including weekends, from around 8 PM till 5 AM. Have parties. Roam the streets, drink alcohol. They never checked their liquor amounts. Complete freedom. You know what I did? Virtually nothing. Few parties but didn't drink. Everyone else had to be home, so I'd be home too. I basically didn't use any of the freedoms. Never did drugs. Never drank. So boring. The longest leash in the world, and didn't wander. Not sure if I was just a great kid or if all that freedom took the excitement out of going crazy. My friend's mother was an extremely relaxed parent. He could do pretty much anything and she would say, "Patrick, stop." Well, one fine December day my friend thought it would be funny to see how flammable the fake trees are. He lit a match and held it to the plant. We were still in his house at this point when the plant caught fire. He picked it up and tried to put into the sink to spray water on it, but the faucet didn't reach the plant. My brother picked up the plant. Now this thing is fully on fire, and threw it into the snow. His mother stood there the entire time, watched this whole thing go down, and only said to Patrick, "Don't do that again." Not my story, but in grade 11 at school, second last year, a kid in my class just stopped showing up. It went on for about a fortnight and it got weird. Teachers were really strange about it, all these rumors. Then finally, after about 2 months, boom, he's back. It turns out his dad took a job overseas and his stepmother didn't speak English. So this kid told her it was school holidays and then intercepted calls from the school when they started and pretended to be his dad and told the school he'd enrolled his son in another school. I don't know what his plan was. His dad came home, ripped him apart, came to the school and ripped them apart for how dumb they must be to fall for it. From the age of 15 I didn't have a time that I had to be in it on the weekends. I would stay out until 3 or 4 AM drinking on the streets with my mates, come home and go to bed. Not a word would be said to me the next day by my parents. When I was 16, myself and a group of my mates decided to get the boat from Ireland to Wales and get a train up to Manchester to see if we could score some football tickets. We left on the Friday morning and didn't come home until the following Monday. My mum called me on the Sunday asking me where I was. I told her I was at the football and she said enjoy. That she wasn't putting a dinner out for me, so. Edit. I was living in Dublin at the time. Go to school in a Mike Wazowski costume when it's not even Halloween. My parents used to facilitate my underage drinking. Anytime I would go to a party, my mum would pick up a bottle for vodka for me. What happened when I reached legal drinking age? I had a few beers and went home. I started smoking weed in the house at 15. Tried to keep it hidden and only did it in the middle of the night when parents were fast asleep. But this one time my parents were going away for a weekend and they missed their flight and they came home without texting me and walked in on a few friends and I smoking in the living room and watching Netflix. Dad walks in and immediately smells it. He looks at me and tells me, "Open the window, jackass, you're going to stink up the house." They found a more expensive ticket and left later that night. When I was a younger girl, most of my best friends were boys. Mum constantly allowed me to have sleepovers at these boys' houses. Guess what happened? We'd stay up all night playing video games and watching movies. My mom was worried I was not getting drunk with my teenage friends. We're talking age 15-16. So she would gently coax me into drinking, offer wines to taste and to make me cocktails to get used to the taste of alcohol, and so forth. I never took up drinking, despite all her efforts. I grew up as a straight-edge designated driver. Also, starting junior high she told me you can skip school if you don't feel like going, but only a couple days a year. I asked her, can I carry those days from year to year? She told me sure. I ended up never skipping a single day of junior high or high school. That lady knew what she was doing. Let me tell you that. Edit. Just remembered I was playing a teen rebel when I was in high school, so I wanted to go out and spray some graffiti with friends. As I was about to leave she caught me at the door. Where are you going? Going with friends to vandalize some public property. Take a sweater. It's cold. Upper middle class upbringing here. My parents got me a car and didn't give a shit about what I did as soon as I got my license. I once drove 150 miles to Baltimore after high school one day to get some crab cakes. I didn't do anything terrible, I don't think. Mostly I just stayed up way too late and skipped school a lot. Still did all the homework and graduated on time. Probably the worst thing I did on a school night was sneak into my church around 2 AM. It wasn't technically a B&D because as a youth leader I had my own key. We played the pipe organ and made coke floats and nachos in the kitchen. I think the next morning I told my parents I went out and would go to school late. They called in sick for me. I was allowed to have girls stay over from like 15 plus. My mum didn't want me shagging in a park or anything like that. Only disadvantage was the remarks, such as at least someone round here is having fun. Or my personal favorite, I had to turn the bloody telly up with all that racket. Love you mum. Buddy of mine had a mom who would let us blaze at his house so that we wouldn't get caught by cops smoking on the street. Makes sense, but at the time, 16-17, it blew my mind that she'd be okay with it. I wanted to try mushrooms when I was about 16. I told my mom and she agreed to trip sit me, basically let me and my friends do mushrooms in the living room. She helped us steep it into tea, and then once we were all gone, she carefully timed her steps and ordered a pizza, baked cookies and watched movies with us, making sure everyone was having a happy hippie trip. To this day, my mom advocates her happy hippie trips of doing drugs with a sober babysitter. I've now moved out. I do smoke cannabis with prescription, but I'm a rather functional human being with no party drive, but a deep love of quality time with my mom over a pizza. Allowing me to go to Cancun, Mexico for spring break with 3 other friends. I was 16 years old. What were they thinking? Edit. To clarify, I was a 16-year-old girl. My other 3 friends were girls as well. This was 1991, before social media and cell phones. It really hit me when I had teenagers of my own. I asked my parents when I got older why they let me do whatever I wanted. The response I got was, you were going to do what you wanted anyway. Seriously, what were they thinking? Not my parents, who were moderately permissive, but had a friend in HS whose parents would get high with him, supplied his younger brother alcohol and Vicodin on request, etc. Fast forward to today, both have major addiction and self-medication issues. Anecdotally, you can be a chill parent, but don't ducking enable and encourage your child's substance use. As a kid, my parents were perfectly okay with me flipping the golf cart into the ditch, towing people behind ATVs on plywood, making pipe bombs, and shooting each other with Roman candles. However, they didn't let me watch Harry Potter because they didn't want my faith to be in witches and wizards. I was allowed to handle Kalashnikovs, belonged to a friendly soldier. I used to steal it and he'd chase after me all playful, didn't realize how absurd it was till later, lol. Was allowed to sleep in the trunk in long drives, play outside around crazy street dogs, eat bullets, don't know how or why, just remember sucking on some shells I found lying around. Funny thing is, my parents were actually strict, but as long as I did active boy stuff, I could get away with a lot. It all seems strange now. Stay out until 10 PM or later. For a teenager, that's okay, I suppose. For a 9-year-old it is not. I was allowed to saddle up my horse, take my Savage 22/20 gauge over-under gun, some beef jerky, a canteen, a sleeping bag and bedroll tied to my saddle, and ride up into the Ochoco Mountains and camp overnight, then ride back the next day. Also did the same with my motorcycle. I was about 13 or 14 at the time. My parents weren't purposely over permissive, but they were heavy drug addicts for the first 20 years of my life. They just didn't have the capacity to properly raise children. I was a full-blown crack and heroin addict by age 15 and they did absolutely nothing about it. I did literally anything I wanted with no repercussions. I mean, they knew their daughter was a prostitute and even encouraged it at times. But they've been clean a few years now, and without the drugs they're really good parents to my little brother, and I myself have a little over 9 months clean. I had crazy arbitrary rules growing up, but my friends always insisted I could do whatever I wanted. The biggest was that I was allowed free range to try new things. Want to make cookies from scratch, having never even seen it done? Give it a whirl. Want to make an entire lean to survival shelter from things you get out of the woods? Watch out for snakes and be careful with the machete. Want to ramp the road by the railroad with your bike? Listen for the train and pay attention to traffic. I was allowed to make a mess, get hurt, make my own fun from an early age. It was pretty great. I grew up in a nudist household, so you could spend the whole day naked if you wanted to. It didn't seem weird to me, but I've met some people who mentioned they would enjoy that. Ducking like and subscribe.